You have never lacked money, not for a single day of your life. What you have lacked is the consciousness of wealth. There is no poverty in the kingdom of heaven, and the kingdom of heaven is within you. So whatever you have called poverty has never been anything but a state of mind, a garment of consciousness you agreed to wear, often without knowing that you had a choice. Look around you for a moment. The room, the objects, the street outside, the numbers on a bank statement, the bills on the table. I tell you, as I have told thousands in my lectures, all this is your own imagining pushed out. Your world is speech made visible, feeling made solid, assumption crystallized into fact. You may say to me, Neville, that sounds beautiful, but I have bills due. My rent is not paid by poetry. My debts do not vanish, because I enjoy a pleasant idea, and I understand. I speak to men and women who are tired. You are tired of struggling, tired of counting coins, tired of waking in the night with the weight of money pressing upon your chest. You have worked harder than you ever thought you could work, and still the figures seem to mock you. You tighten your belt, you save what you can. You worry, and the more you worry, the more life seems to present you with reasons to worry. Tonight, I am not here to tell you to work harder. I am here to tell you that the work has been misdirected. You have fought with shadows on the wall, while ignoring the light that casts them. You have tried to change the branches, while leaving the root untouched. You have rearranged the furniture inside a house, whose foundations you never examined. And the foundation of your life is your assumption of yourself. What you really believe yourself to be, you will inevitably express. You look at your present circumstances, and you say, this is reality. You point to the account, the empty purse, the overdue notice, and you say, Neville, how can you tell me I have never lacked money when I have lived like this? And I answer you with all the earnestness I possess. What you call reality is not present truth. It is past belief, frozen into form. The facts that now disturb you are old. They are the harvest of yesterday's feelings, last month's inner conversations, last year's assumptions. You are staring at a garden you planted long ago, not knowing that you were planting at all. Every night, as you drifted into sleep, you were sowing. Every morning when you rose with worry, you were watering the seeds of lack. So do not condemn yourself. You did not know what you were doing. Tonight, you will know. I am going to show you that the distance between your present state and financial relief is not measured in dollars, nor in months, nor even in weeks, but in one assumption made in a particular state of consciousness at a particular moment of the night. If you can sustain that assumption for moments only, if you can dare to touch it and feel it real, the law that governs all creation must move to rearrange your world. I know that as I say this, something in you protests. A voice inside whispers, it cannot be that simple. If this were true, why has no one told me? Why did my parents struggle? Why do so many labor all their lives and see so little? My dear, they were never taught that imagination creates reality. They were taught that the world out there decides, and they must fit themselves to it. Tonight, I ask you to reverse this completely. The world does not decide for you. You decide for the world. The outer world is not the cause of your state. It is the mirror of your state. Even your so-called evidence is not telling you the truth about what you must be. It is only telling you what you have been assuming without awareness. So when you lift a piece of paper and see a number that frightens you, remind yourself gently, this is not a decree from God. This is a photograph of my old belief. I am free, this very night, to assume anew. Perhaps you came to this message with the heaviest kind of weariness, not only of body, but of soul. You have tried systems, you have tried advice, you have tried being positive, and you are tempted to conclude that nothing works. I tell you, nothing has worked because you have never truly begun from the only place where change is possible. The inner man. Out there is the shadow. In here, within your own wonderful human imagination, is the substance. Should. Tonight we will not chase money. We will not beg for money. We will not plead with a distant power to send us what we think we do not have. Tonight we will quietly, decisively, clothe ourselves with a new consciousness. We will put on, as a man puts on a coat, the feeling of the one who already has. And we will do it in the most powerful moment of your day, that sacred borderland between waking and sleep. In my own life, and in the lives of hundreds who have written to me, I have seen the power of a single night. One night of rightly directed imagination can do what years of toil could not accomplish. One night of assuming the end, in the right way, in the right state, can begin a chain of events you could never arrange with all your cleverness. Do not think of this night as ordinary. You did not come here by accident. Something in you is tired of the old story. Something in you is ready to lay down the garment of I never have enough and put on the garment of I am provided for. I am supplied. I am the one to whom money flows. I am not asking you to accept this blindly. I am inviting you to test it. Before this night ends, you will understand one hidden technique, one assumption before sleep that if practiced faithfully will attract money to you quickly. Not because money is a capricious spirit that must be coaxed, but because your consciousness will no longer oppose it. You may say, but Neville, I have heard affirmations before. I have spoken words and nothing happened. And I answer, words without feeling are dead. Sentences spoken from the consciousness of lack only reinforce lack. You cannot declare, I am wealthy while feeling poor, and expect the subconscious to be confused. It hears your feeling, not your phrase. What we shall do tonight is different. We are going to enter the place where the subconscious is most open, most receptive, and we will plant there a living seed of assumption. Not a wish, not a hope, not a request, but a fact, accepted inwardly and allowed to sink into the depths. I want you even now to notice your own heart. Notice that beneath your fears, there is a very quiet knowing that life was not meant to be an endless struggle. That quiet knowing is your true self. It remembers, however faintly, that you are heir to infinite supply, that what you call money is only one small stream of a vast ocean within. Tonight, we do not create something from nothing. We simply remove the dam. Now I ask you to make a simple outward declaration of your inward willingness. In my meetings, I would often invite men and women to stand as a sign to themselves that they had decided. You may do something similar in a different form. If there is a place for you to comment, use it as a little altar. Write these words, not for me, but as a decree to yourself and to the unseen reality that responds to you. I'm ready to receive. Do not write them lightly. Let them be a decision. As you comment those words, let your inner voice say, I am ready to stop arguing for my limitations. I am ready to stop telling the old story. I am ready to receive a new concept of myself. That small outward act can anchor the inward shift. It is like chiseling a date into stone. Here, this night, I declared myself ready. From this point on, regard this evening as a turning point in your life, not because of me, but because of what you will dare to accept about yourself. The law is no respecter of persons. It does not favor the rich over the poor, the educated over the uneducated, the young over the old. It responds only to assumption. And I say to you with full assurance, before this night ends, you will possess the key. You will know exactly what to assume, when to assume it, and how to let it sink into the depths, so that money, opportunities, and relief begin to move toward you as naturally as the tide returns to the shore. So, my friend, breathe. Let the old tension soften. You have come to the end of one way of living and to the opening of another. You have never lacked money. You have only worn the consciousness of lack. Tonight we will change the garment. Money is not material. I say this slowly because the ears revolt before the heart understands. You have been trained by parents, by teachers, by the world itself, to believe that money is something hard, heavy, external, limited. You were told it must be earned by strain, captured by struggle, guarded by fear, and so you learned to chase a shadow while ignoring the light that casts it. What you call money is not substance. It is a symbol. It is a shadow thrown upon the screen of space by an inner state of consciousness. And just as a shadow cannot exist without the object that casts it, so money cannot exist in your experience without the consciousness that generates it. Change the consciousness, and the shadow must change. It cannot do otherwise. You may think this sounds mystical, even impractical, and yet everything you touch in your world, everything you call solid and fixed, was first conceived in a mind. The house you live in, the chair you sit upon, the clothes you wear, the institutions that govern society. Every one of these began as an invisible idea. The visible world is only the outpicturing of the invisible. Money is no exception. When I say that money is not material, I mean that it has no independent life of its own. It is not a god that grants favors or withholds blessings. It is not an enemy that must be defeated, nor a master that must be served. It is the obedient reflection of an inner conviction. It goes where consciousness points it, just as faithfully as light follows a lens. Scarcity, then, does not exist in the kingdom. And when I speak of the kingdom, I do not speak of a place in the sky, nor a realm to be entered after death. I speak of the kingdom of consciousness, the inner world of states. The kingdom is within. That is not poetry. That is a literal psychological fact. Every possible condition of life exists now as a state within consciousness. Wealth is a state. Poverty is a state. Security is a state. Anxiety is a state. You do not travel to these places. You enter them inwardly. If scarcity does not exist in the kingdom, it cannot exist as a cause. It only exists as an effect of assuming yourself to be one who lacks. The moment you cease to occupy the state of lack, the effect called scarcity begins to dissolve. The outer world cannot continue to display what the inner world has abandoned. Most men and women have been taught only one method of securing money: labor harder, compete more fiercely, sacrifice more deeply. And I do not deny that effort has its place in the world of forms. But I say to you with compassion and certainty, effort without right assumption is labor in vain. You can toil all your life from a consciousness of lack and never arrive at abundance, because the consciousness from which you work is the seed of what you harvest. There is a profound difference between working from effort and working from assumption. One strains against the current, the other flows with it. One says, I must fight to become. The other quietly knows, I already am. And it is always the quiet knowing that prevails. Let me illustrate this with something you may have observed. Have you not seen two men performing the same task, exerting the same effort, yet living in utterly different financial conditions? One seems to move from opportunity to opportunity with ease. Doors open. Assistance appears. The other struggles endlessly. Always one step behind. Always delayed. Always almost there. If money were purely material, if it responded only to physical exertion, this would make no sense. But when you see that money is the shadow of consciousness, everything becomes clear. One man works from the assumption of supply, the other from the assumption of lack. And the world faithfully mirrors both. I recall a man who came to me many years ago. He had worked in commerce all his life. He knew the trade from bottom to top. He understood figures, markets, negotiations. And yet, despite all his knowledge, he never seemed to prosper. He always had enough to survive, but never enough to breathe. His question to me was simple: what am I doing wrong? And my answer startled him. I said, you are not doing anything wrong. You are assuming wrongly. He resisted this, of course, as most do. He told me of his long hours, his sacrifices, his discipline, and I did not dispute any of it. I asked him only one thing: when you think of money, what do you feel? He was silent for a long moment. Then he said quietly, I feel tense. I feel as though it might slip away. I feel as though I must hold it tightly or lose it. I said, then that is the state you are living from. And so that is what your world must show you. Money that always threatens to slip away. Contrast that with another gentleman who attended my lectures. He was not born into wealth. He did not inherit a fortune. Yet his manner toward money was entirely different. When asked if he feared loss, he smiled and said, loss does not occur to me. That is not bravado. That is state. And his life reflected it. He moved through business with quiet confidence. He did not rush. He did not grasp. He assumed supply, and supply followed him like a shadow. Now, I do not tell you this to criticize your present feelings about money. I tell you this to liberate you from the illusion that money is something you must fight, chase, or fear. Money is not your adversary. It is your echo. It repeats back to you the tone of your inner life. When you say, the kingdom is within, you are saying that all wealth already exists as a potential state within your own consciousness. You are not trying to drag wealth in from the outside world. You are awakening it from within. This changes everything. If money were truly material, limited, external, then fear would be justified. There would be real competition. There would be real scarcity. But if money is only consciousness expressing itself in form, then the only competition is between states of mind, and you are free at every moment to choose the state you occupy. The tragedy is that most people choose unconsciously. They inherit beliefs from their family, their culture, their early experiences. They take on the language of lack without ever questioning it. We can't afford that. Money is tight. The rich are lucky. People like us don't get ahead. These phrases sound harmless. They are not. They are seeds, and the soil of the subconscious never questions the seed. It only grows it. You may think you need to change your job, your education, your connections, and sometimes those outer changes will follow, but they are never the cause. They are always the effect. The cause is your inner assumption. The cause is the state from which you think, feel, and act. I have seen men change their financial life without changing their occupation at all, simply by changing the state they lived in inwardly. I have seen clerks become executives, servants become proprietors, men without prospects suddenly surrounded by opportunity. The outer setting shifted as naturally as a scene changes upon a stage, because the actor had changed his role. Let me give you a simple, quiet example. A woman once wrote to me from a small town. She had no obvious means of improving her income. There were no new industries, no sudden economic booms, and yet she grew tired of living at the edge of survival. She did not rage against her town. She did not curse her employers. She simply changed her assumption of herself. Each night she fell asleep feeling that she was a woman of means, that she lived with ease, that money came to her freely. Within a short time, a chain of events unfolded so gentle and natural that it almost seemed accidental. A relative she barely knew remembered her in a will. A small investment opportunity appeared. A new business opened that required someone with exactly her temperament. Within a year, her life was financially transformed. She did not make money. She assumed herself into the state where money was the natural outpicturing. When you grasp that money is the shadow and not the substance, fear begins to loosen its grip on you. You stop asking, "How will I get it?" and begin to ask, "Who am I being?" That is an entirely different question, and it is the only one that matters. The world teaches you to measure reality by your senses. I teach you to measure it by your state. The world says, "Believe it when you see it." I say, "You will see it when you believe it." The world says, "Work until you receive." I say, "Assume you have received, and the work will arrange itself." There is a deep rest that comes to a man or woman the moment this truth is felt, not merely understood, but felt. A rest that has nothing to do with sleep, and everything to do with trust. The frantic sense of "I must get" begins to dissolve. In its place arises something far more powerful. I already am. Now understand me clearly. I am not telling you to abandon action in the world. I am telling you to abandon the belief that action is the cause. You will still act. You will still move. But you will move from a different place. Not from hunger, but from fullness. Not from fear, but from certainty. And actions taken from certainty produce results that fear-driven actions can never touch. In the kingdom within, there is no shortage of possibility. There is no shortage of supply. There is no shortage of ways. The only shortage there ever seems to be is a shortage of belief in one's own creative power. And that too can be corrected. Now, as this truth begins to settle in you, that money is not material, that scarcity does not exist in the kingdom, that the outer world is only the faithful mirror of your inner state, I want you to notice something subtle beginning to happen in you. The tension around money may begin to soften just a little. The idea that you are trapped may loosen its hold. This is the first sign that you are shifting states. You have spent years, perhaps a lifetime, believing that the world decides how much you may have. Tonight you begin to learn that you decide what the world may show you. And this decision is not made with the mouth alone. It is made with feeling, with identity, with assumption. In the chapters that follow, I will show you precisely how to assume, how to enter the state where the subconscious accepts the new identity without resistance, and how a single assumption made in the right state before sleep can begin to draw money to you with surprising speed. But for now, let this first truth settle deeply. Money is not your source. Consciousness is your source. Money is only one of its many shadows. And once you control the light, you need no longer chase the shadow. There is a subtle difference that decides the fate of nearly every man and woman who attempts to apply this law. It is the difference between thinking of what you desire and thinking from the fulfillment of that desire. Nearly everyone thinks of their wish. Very few learn to think from it. And that is why so many fail, and so few enter into the promise. To think of wealth is to stand outside it. It is to look toward it as something distant, something not yet yours. It is the posture of a beggar pressed against the glass of a great house, gazing inside at warmth and light while standing in the cold. He may admire the furniture, imagine the comfort, even picture himself within those walls, but so long as he stands outside, he is still a beggar. To think from wealth is to live inside the house. It is to rest in the feeling of ownership. The owner does not stare through windows. He walks through rooms. He sits, he rests, he moves freely. He does not speculate about whether the house will be his. He uses it because it already is. This is the entire difference between imagining and creating. Most people imagine from the outside. They visualize checks arriving. They picture new cars. They fantasize about larger homes. And yet beneath all these pictures, there is a silent confession. I do not have, and because the subconscious does not hear words, but feels states, it receives only the state of not having, and faithfully reproduces it. This is why so many practice for years and wonder why nothing changes. They have never crossed the threshold. They have stayed at the window. Why does the majority fail? Not for lack of effort, not for lack of sincerity. They fail because they remain loyal to the identity of the one who wants. And the identity of the one who wants can never receive, because wanting is evidence of not having. The world does not respond to what you desire. It responds to what you assume yourself to be. If you assume yourself to be one who is waiting, reality must reflect waiting. If you assume yourself to be one who is provided for, reality must reflect provision. There is no exception. There is only obedience. Now I ask you to feel into this distinction, not to analyze it, but to sense it. There is a tension in wanting, there is a reaching outward, there is a subtle ache, there is a constant measuring of circumstances. There is the quiet question beneath every hope. When? But in the state of having, there is no tension, there is no reaching, there is no questioning, there is only rest. When you think from wealth, your breath changes, your shoulders soften, your thoughts grow slower and quieter. There is no urgency in you. There is no frantic calculation. There is a deep, peaceful knowing that needs no proof. Most people have never allowed themselves to feel this state unless the outer world temporarily justified it. A bonus, a windfall, a good month. And so they learn to tie their inner peace to outer conditions. But I tell you, the law works in the reverse direction. The feeling comes first. The condition follows. Let me give you a simple contrast. You can feel right now. Imagine you are waiting for a letter that will decide your financial fate, perhaps an approval, an offer, a settlement. In the waiting, notice your body. There is tension. The mind races. You check the clock. You listen for footsteps. You imagine both success and disappointment in the same breath. You are not at rest. Now imagine that the letter has already been opened and it was everything you hoped for. The matter is settled. The worry is gone. How does your body feel now? There is a release. The chest opens. The breath deepens. The mind grows quiet. That quiet that is thinking from. And it is that quiet which creates. You cannot create from agitation. Creation comes from acceptance, from rest, from identity. When a man thinks of wealth, he says inwardly, I hope. When a man thinks from wealth, he says inwardly, of course. Those two inner tones produce two entirely different worlds, even if the outer actions look the same for a time. Now let me show you how this difference appears in everyday life. Two men sit at the same desk, doing the same work. The first thinks of success. He tells himself, one day this will pay off. One day I will escape this. And every day he goes home tired, slightly bitter, slightly anxious. He watches others rise and wonders why not him. He is thinking of. The second man thinks from success. He moves through his work as though it is already a stepping stone past, not a prison to escape. He is not in a hurry, because inwardly he knows he has already arrived. And because of that, he sees opportunities the first cannot see. His manner draws assistance. His calm invites confidence. Doors open not because he asked, but because his state made it inevitable. Now let me speak to you honestly. This shift is not intellectual. You cannot think your way into thinking from. It is an act of identity. It is a surrender of the old self-image and the quiet assumption of a new one. You do not argue with the old identity. You do not fight it. You simply leave it. Just as you would leave one room and enter another, you leave the state of wanting and enter the state of having. And here is the supreme mystery. When you enter the state of having inwardly, the outer world begins to rearrange itself without your conscious effort. Events fall into place. People act in new ways. Circumstances bend. And when you look back, you will be astonished at how naturally it all unfolded. Now I will give you small inner scenes, simple contrasts that reveal this difference more deeply. I want you to feel them, not merely hear them. Picture yourself standing before a closed door. On the other side of the door is the life you desire. You knock, you listen, you knock again. You wonder if the door will open. This is thinking of. You are outside, waiting for permission. Now picture the same door, but this time you hold the key in your hand. You open it quietly and step inside. You do not announce, you do not ask. You enter because it is yours. This is thinking from. Or imagine sitting in a fine restaurant. You study the menu but hesitate to order because you are unsure whether you can pay. That hesitation in your chest, that is thinking of. Now imagine the same table, the same menu, but you know without question that the bill is already covered. Your behavior changes instantly. Not because money has arrived yet, but because identity has changed. That is thinking from. Or imagine holding your purse tightly while browsing, calculating every movement. And then imagine walking through the same shop, knowing abundance is secure. The body moves differently. The face relaxes. The eyes soften. That is the difference. Creation is automatic from that second state. You see now why so many fail. They practice from the first posture. They imagine while clinging to the identity of the one who does not have. They say words of plenty while feeling the weight of lack. And the subconscious hears only the weight. To think from is an act of quiet rebellion against appearances. It is not denial. It is not pretending the world does not exist. It is simply refusing to grant outer evidence the authority to define your inner self. The world may say, "You do not have." You quietly reply, "I have." And you do not shout it. You do not argue it. You rest in it. That rest is power. And now I come to the most difficult point for the human mind to accept. You cannot reach this state by force. You cannot strain your way into thinking from. Effort belongs to the old identity. The very attempt to force it proves that you are still thinking of. The shift happens only by yielding. Yielding the old story. Yielding the old self-definition. Yielding the habit of measuring yourself by facts. When a man yields like this, even for a moment, the world begins to move. And this is why sleep is so sacred. In the waking state, the old identity fights for survival. It defends itself with logic, with memory, with fear. But as you drift towards sleep, the guardian of the old self grows drowsy. The gate is unguarded. The soul becomes impressionable. And in that sacred interval, you may step from thinking of into thinking, from as easily as stepping across a threshold, not with struggle, but with assumption. In the chapters that follow, I will show you precisely how to use that threshold, how to enter it without strain, and how to make the assumption that collapses time and begins the movement of money toward you. But for now, I ask you to observe something in yourself. When you think of money, is there tension? When you think of having money, is there relief? The relief is the state. The tension is the old self. And only one of them creates. You were never meant to spend your life gazing through the window. You were meant to live inside the house. And the door to that house is not made of effort. It is made of assumption. You enter it the moment you dare to think from the fulfillment instead of the desire. And once you enter, the world has no choice but to follow you inside. If you truly wish to understand why this law never fails, you must be willing to look beyond money itself and into the nature of the power that brings money into being. And that power is not separate from you. It is not distant. It is not external, it is your own wonderful human consciousness. I say this carefully, because the human mind has been trained to bow before an outward God, a power somewhere above the stars, that gives or withholds according to unknown decree. And so man learned to beg, to plead, to wait, to feel small. But the great revelation hidden in the scriptures is not that God gives to man, it is that God becomes man. When the ancient text says, "I am hath sent me unto you," it is not speaking of a distant deity revealing himself to a frightened people. It is revealing the very structure of your being. Before you say, "I am rich," or "I am poor," there is first simply "I am." Before every description, every limitation, every story, there is awareness of being. That awareness is what men have called God. Not a personality in the sky, not a judge on a throne, but the living awareness that is hearing these words right now. You do not possess "I am," you are "I am." And whatever you attach to that "I am" becomes your lived reality. This is the great conditioning of consciousness. The raw creative power is neutral. It takes the shape of whatever you unite it with. If you join it with weakness, it becomes weakness. If you join it with failure, it becomes failure. If you join it with wealth, it becomes wealth. The mistake of the world is not belief in God. It is misplacement of God. Men placed him outside themselves, and then wondered why they felt powerless. They imagined a giver separate from the receiver, and so they learned to wait instead of to assume. But when you discover that the giver and the receiver are one, something breaks open inside you. You no longer ask, "Will God give this to me?" You begin to ask, "What am I consenting to be?" This is where creation truly begins. Every time you say inwardly, "I am poor," you have conditioned the formless power with the state of poverty. And the power obeys. It must. It has no choice. You gave it identity. Every time you say inwardly, "I am wealthy," you have conditioned that same power with the state of wealth. And again, it must obey. It does not question your worth. It does not examine your past. It does not consult your circumstances. It simply becomes what you say you are. This is why the world around you feels so personal. This is why circumstances seem to echo your inner beliefs with frightening accuracy. The world is not happening to you. It is happening from you. It is your "I am" speaking back to you in the language of form. And here is the strange thing. Most people never realize they are conditioning "I am" at all. They believe they are merely describing reality. They say, "I am broke," not knowing they are issuing a creative command. They say, "Money is hard," not knowing they are scripting the resistance they will then experience. They think they are observing life, when in truth they are authoring it. You do not observe yourself into wealth. You assume yourself into wealth. You do not pray "I am" into richness. You condition "I am" with richness. The outer world then scrambles to comply, and it does scramble. It rearranges with a precision that seems miraculous only because the mechanism is hidden from the waking senses. Now I tell you this not to inflate your ego, but to dissolve it. Because the small self, the frightened self, the doubting self, the struggling self, is the result of having misidentified "I am" for many years. The moment you discover that "I am" is not small, the small self begins to dissolve. And with it dissolves the belief that you must beg life for permission to live well. Now consider carefully the statements. "I am poor," "I am unlucky," "I am stuck," "I am always struggling." Each of these is a union of "I am" with limitation. And the union is law. It must externalize. Now consider the alternative. "I am wealthy," "I am always provided for," "I am favored," "I am supported by life." These are not affirmations in the modern sense. They are identifications. They are states you clothe "I am" with. And consciousness always wears the garment you give it, until you change the garment. The world you see is nothing more than the closet of garments you have already worn. You have worn lack, so you have seen lack. You have worn struggle, so you have seen struggle. You have worn anxiety, so you have seen anxiety. But you are not bound to any garment forever. States are removable. Identities are detachable. You can step out of one and into another as easily as a man changes coats. But only when you stop mistaking the coat for yourself. You are not poor. You are not rich. You are not fortunate or unfortunate. You are the one who wears these states. and money will always dress itself to match the garment you choose for I am. This is why the world feels so consistent. It is not stubborn, it is faithful. It is not resisting you, it is obeying you. Even when you suffer, it is still obeying you. Now let me show you the mechanism that makes the world echo you. Consciousness moves by reflection. Whatever you feel to be true of yourself vibrates outward and returns to you as experience. Your emotions are not reactions to the world. They are messages to the world. Every feeling you harbor is a command to existence, saying, more of this. If you feel insecure, you command situations that echo insecurity. If you feel safe, you command situations that echo safety. If you feel abundant, the world answers with supply, and the echo cannot lie. It can only repeat. Many people try to cheat the law by speaking words, while secretly feeling the opposite. They say, I am wealthy, while feeling desperate. They say, money flows to me, while feeling anxious. And when nothing changes, they conclude that the law is false. It is not false, it is precise. It obeyed the feeling. The echo always comes from the feeling state, never the spoken phrase. This is why I have always said that feeling is the secret. Not hoping, not desiring, not visualizing as entertainment. Feeling as identity. When you feel yourself to be wealthy, you are not imagining wealth. You are being wealthy, and being is creative. Now I must address a fear that often arises at this point. Some hear this and think, if I have been creating everything, then I am to blame for all my suffering, and guilt follows quickly behind that thought. But guilt is another state, and guilt too will reflect. You must understand this properly. You did not create ignorance on purpose. You were taught. You inherited beliefs. You absorbed limitations without knowing their power. There is no condemnation here, only awakening. Once you awaken, responsibility becomes freedom rather than burden. You are no longer at the mercy of events. You are at the center of cause. And this is the most dignified position a being can occupy. Now observe how this law explains the behavior of others in your financial life. Employers, clients, banks, strangers, they all move according to the state you occupy within. Not because they are controlled like puppets, but because consciousness is one. You think of yourself as undervalued. They confirm it. You think of yourself as worthy. They confirm it. You assume delay. They delay you. You assume support. They support you. It appears to be coincidence. It is actually coherence. Everyone is you pushed out, not their personality, their function in your world. They play the role your state requires. When your state changes, their role changes, or they leave the stage entirely. You do not attract what you want. You attract what you are. This is why the transformation must begin at I am. Not at effort, not at strategy, not at struggle, at identity. Now let me show you how subtle the conditioning of I am truly is. A man may never say aloud, I am poor, yet still live from that identity entirely. It shows itself as hesitation, as tightness, as guilt over spending, as suspicion of opportunity, as fear of loss. These feelings condition I am without words, and the echo arrives just the same. Another man may never speak loudly about abundance, yet his inner ease, his natural trust in supply, his lack of anxiety about tomorrow, these quietly affirm wealth. And the echo arrives here as well. The subconscious hears what you are, not what you shout. Now listen carefully to what I say next, because this is one of the deepest truths of creation. You cannot change I am by force. You can only change it by consent. You do not wrestle poverty into wealth. You release poverty and accept wealth. And acceptance is not emotion. It is identity. The moment you consent inwardly to being one who is provided for, the entire machinery of life begins to move. You may not see it at once. You may not feel it immediately, but the movement has begun. And this is why sleep is sacred. Because in that half-dreaming state, resistance fades. The old self loosens its grip, and I am becomes gently available for new conditioning. You cannot shout a new identity into I am, but you can whisper it in drowsiness. And the whisper will out-create the shout. In the chapters that follow, you will learn how to enter this state deliberately, how to bypass the old identity without struggle, how to gently impress a new assumption upon the creative power that has always been within you. But for now, let this sink into you slowly and deeply. You are not trying to get money. You are learning to let I am wear wealth. Because once wealth is worn inwardly, it must appear outwardly. The world is not the source. The world is the echo, and you are the voice that speaks first. There is one misunderstanding that has cost more seekers their results than any other. It is the belief that imagining is seeing pictures. They strain to visualize. They struggle to hold images. They force scenes like moving paintings in the mind, and yet nothing changes. Then they conclude that imagination does not work for them. But imagination was never the picture. Imagination is the feeling. The picture is only the doorway. The feeling is the power. You can stare at a photograph of bread for hours and never satisfy hunger. But one bite of real bread changes the body instantly. In the same way, you can picture wealth endlessly and remain poor. But one true moment of felt abundance begins to alter your life at once. Feeling is the secret. Not emotion as excitement, not surface happiness, not nervous anticipation, but the quiet conviction of being, the feeling of already having, the feeling of rest after fulfillment, the feeling of it is done. The subconscious mind does not respond to words. It does not respond to images as such. It responds only to feeling. Feeling is the language it understands. Feeling is the electric current that carries the thought into form. This is why a man may repeat affirmations 1,000 times and remain unchanged. His words are not charged with being. They are hollow sounds. But let another man feel one moment of deep relief, one moment of satisfied being, and the law is set in motion. Do you now see why so many visualize and fail? They look at the image while secretly feeling empty. The subconscious hears only emptiness, and emptiness multiplies. Emotion without an image can create. Image without emotion creates nothing. I have seen people receive their desires without seeing a single picture in the mind, because they felt it. And I have seen people see images as vividly as motion pictures and receive nothing because they did not feel. What does abundance actually feel like? This is the question that changes everything. Most people do not know. They confuse it with excitement. They confuse it with spending. They confuse it with luxury. But the true feeling of wealth is far quieter than that. Wealth does not feel like fireworks. Wealth feels like ease. Wealth feels like safety. Wealth feels like breathing without tightness. Wealth feels like silence, where anxiety used to be. It is the feeling of not needing to think about money at all. It is walking through the world without calculation. It is choosing without fear. It is rest in the chest and softness in the mind. That is the feeling you must generate. And you do not generate it by looking at numbers. You generate it by entering the state inwardly. Even if the outer world contradicts it completely, you must be willing to commit the greatest act of courage a human being can perform, to feel what is not yet visible. Most people wait for the world to give them permission to feel safe, to feel fulfilled, to feel abundant, and because they wait, they never receive. For the law is exact. Feeling comes first. Now I will show you how to awaken this feeling, even if your present circumstances are heavy. You already know exactly what fulfilled relief feels like, because you have felt it before. You have felt the end of worry. You have felt the release of tension. You have felt the peace that comes after a problem is solved. You may not associate it with money yet, but your body knows it well. Perhaps it was the moment you were told you were safe after a fright. Perhaps it was the moment a burden was lifted. Perhaps it was the moment something you feared did not happen. That feeling is your doorway. You do not need to create a new emotion. You only need to redirect an old one. Call up that memory now. Not the scene, not the details, but the sensation, the softening, the exhale, the quiet smile inside the chest, the loosening of the jaw, the drop of the shoulders. This sensation is the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Once you have it, you do not need to see any pictures at all. You simply let this feeling be about money now, about security now, about abundance now. The subconscious does not care where the feeling came from. It cannot tell the difference between remembered feeling and present reality. It only receives feeling as fact. Now let me guide you gently into this sensation so that you understand it not as idea, but as experience. Do not strain. Do not try to force anything. Simply listen. Imagine for a moment that every question about money has already been answered. Not one is left unresolved. Not one bill remains unpaid. There is breathing room everywhere. There is space. There is margin. There is no urgency. Do not imagine the process, only the aftermath. Feel the way your body would sit if nothing were hanging over you. Feel the way your breath would move if tomorrow were already safe. Feel the way your thoughts would quiet if provision were established. Let your shoulders drop just a little. Let the jaw soften. Let the brow smooth. That physical softness is the gateway. Now imagine not as a picture, but as a knowing that this calm is justified, that it makes sense, that there is a reason to be at ease. You do not need to know the reason yet. The subconscious only needs the state. This is the feeling that creates. This is what the poor man has never allowed himself to feel. This is what the wealthy man lives in without thought. Not excitement, not thrill, but rest. And now I tell you the most important truth of all. You do not attract what you want. You attract the state you feel natural in. If tension feels natural, tension will repeat. If struggle feels familiar, struggle will echo. But when rest begins to feel normal, the world must conform. This is why your work is not primarily to see, but to accept. To accept a new normal inwardly before it appears outwardly. Every night, when you lie down to sleep, you pass naturally through the gateway of creation. The conscious mind loosens. The outer world fades. The body grows heavy. The judgmental faculty softens, and the soul becomes impressionable. This moment is sacred, not religious, creative. And in that moment, if you carry the feeling of fulfillment into sleep, you carry a living seed into the womb of reality. You do not need to hold it long. You need only to touch it truly. Now let me show you a deeper layer of this law. When you feel fulfilled, you are not merely stimulating emotion. You are selecting an identity. You are saying to the creative power within you, this is who I am now. And identity always organizes behavior, opportunity, intuition, and circumstances without conscious planning. The man who feels wealthy will naturally speak differently. He will choose differently. He will hesitate less. He will trust more. He will move with a quiet authority. These are not strategies. They are the byproducts of state. And because of these subtle changes, doors begin to open that were always there, but invisible to the anxious mind. The anxious mind sees only barriers. The peaceful mind sees pathways. It is not that the world changes instantly in appearance. It is that you begin to move through a different version of it. Now I want to bring you into one more inner exercise, not as a technique to force results, but as a way to taste the state clearly. Let your breathing slow. Let it deepen slightly. With each exhale, imagine you are releasing the weight of needing. Every out-breath gently says, I do not need to chase. Now imagine that you have just received news, not dramatic news, but calm, solid news. The kind that makes you quietly grateful rather than excited. News that settles something. News that closes a chapter of worry. Feel that soft gratitude. You do not jump up. You do not shout. You simply sit differently. That difference is everything. This is the true vibration of wealth. Not noise, not display, but quiet authority. And now I ask you to recognize something profound. The state you just touched is not foreign to you. It is not something you must learn. It is something you have forgotten you are allowed to feel without permission. The world trained you to feel safe only when conditions allowed it. The law invites you to feel safe first, and let conditions catch up. This is the great reversal, and it is why the timid fail, and the daring receive. To feel abundance before it appears is an act of spiritual courage, but it is the only act that creates it. You may say, but what if I am deceiving myself? And I answer, you have already been deceiving yourself for years, by thinking that fear tells the truth. Fear has never told you the truth once. It only predicts what it feels, and feelings create facts. Better to deceive yourself with peace than to obey panic as though it were wisdom. Now I prepare you for what comes next, for in the next movement I will show you how to enter the precise state where this feeling can be planted without resistance, where the conscious mind cannot interfere, where the impression goes straight into the creative depths. But before we move, I want this truth to land firmly within you. You do not create with effort. You create with acceptance. You do not impress the subconscious with images. You impress it with identity. And identity is always felt, never merely thought. Tonight, when you feel instead of fantasize, when you rest instead of reach, when you assume instead of wish, you will begin for the first time to work with the actual machinery of creation. And once you touch it, you will never again believe that visualization alone creates. You will know from experience that feeling is the secret. If you wish, I will continue with the next movement where I lead you into the doorway of sleep itself and show you how to use that threshold with exactness and certainty. There is a narrow bridge that every man and woman crosses twice each day. Once as you descend into sleep and once as you rise from it. Most people pass over this bridge unconsciously, unaware that beneath it flows the creative power of their entire life. But I tell you, this bridge is the gate of God. This is the state I have called the state akin to sleep. It is neither full waking nor full slumber. It is the soft twilight between the two. The body is heavy. The world is distant. The senses are withdrawing, yet the mind still knows that it is. This is the sacred interval where the doors of the subconscious stand open, and the watchman of reason has stepped aside. In the full waking state, the conscious mind guards the gate. It asks questions, it judges, it doubts, it compares what you imagine with what your senses report. But in this drowsy state, the guardian relaxes. The sword of logic is lowered. You are no longer arguing with life. You are receptive. And what you impress upon yourself in this state is received as law. This is why the ancient scriptures spoke of God visiting man in sleep. Not because dreams are divine fantasies, but because sleep is the natural surrender of the will. And wherever the will is surrendered, creation enters. I have watched thousands struggle to change their circumstances through effort while neglecting the one moment where change requires no effort at all. The moment before sleep, the moment when you are no longer fighting the world, the moment when the soul is soft. Now let me show you how to approach this state, not as a mystic, but as a practical operator of law. When you lie down at night, your body is the first to enter this twilight. The muscles loosen, the limbs grow heavy, the breath slows. These are not accidents. They are signals. They are invitations. The body is preparing to let go. And when the body lets go, the subconscious listens. Do not rush this moment. Do not treat it casually. Let it be a ceremony of quiet. Lie comfortably, not stiffly, not awkwardly. Let the body be at rest. And then allow your attention to drift gently away from the outer world. You are not trying to concentrate. You are allowing yourself to sink. You may notice that your thoughts slow, that images begin to float without your effort, that the edges of awareness soften. You may feel as though you are falling inward rather than outward. This is the threshold. Many fail here because they try to enter the state by force. They strain, they attempt to will themselves into drowsiness. But drowsiness is not a thing you grab. It is a thing you allow. Sleep never comes by command. It comes by consent. And so with Sat, you do not seize it. You release into it. The easiest way to enter this state is through physical relaxation. The body is the doorway. When the body surrenders, the mind follows. Allow the feet to grow heavy. Let the calves soften. Let the thighs rest deeply. Let the abdomen loosen. Let the chest sink. Let the shoulders drop. Let the arms lie without intention. Let the jaw slacken. Let the tongue rest. Let the brow smooth. Let the eyes float behind closed lids. You are not doing anything. You are ceasing to do. If your mind wanders, do not correct it sharply. Correction is effort. Simply return gently to the sensation of heaviness. The heaviness is the sign. The heaviness is the sign. The heaviness is the gate. Now many are afraid at this point. They think they are losing control, and they are right. That is precisely the point. Creation begins where control ends. You must temporarily release your need to supervise life. As you hover in this state, you will notice that your breathing has changed. It is slower, deeper, less deliberate. Your limbs may feel numb or distant. Your sense of location in the body may shift. These are not disorders. These are confirmations. You are at the door. But here is the great challenge: to remain conscious long enough to impress the seed. Most people either remain too awake and never touch the subconscious, or they fall asleep too quickly and cede nothing deliberately. The art is to stand on the edge. To help you stay on that edge, you must avoid stimulation. Do not rehearse worries. Do not plan tomorrow. Do not review the day aggressively. Those things pull you back into waking consciousness. Instead, let your attention rest on a single simple idea, not analytical, not dynamic, but static. The feeling of rest, the awareness of being, the quiet sense of I am. You are not trying to think. You are allowing being. If sleep begins to pull you under too quickly, you may gently repeat a simple phrase in rhythm with the breath, not to stimulate the mind, but to keep it lightly tethered while the body falls away. Do not make the phrase complex. Let it be simple and slow. You are not imprinting yet. You are hovering. Now let me speak plainly about something essential. You must not fear falling asleep. Sleep is not your enemy, but unconscious sleep is a missed opportunity. Conscious entry into sleep is the master key. If you fall asleep too quickly, you have simply planted whatever state you were feeling during the day. And for most, that state is worry. This is why so many awaken to the same troubles they carry to bed. They fell asleep in the state of burden, and the subconscious faithfully accepted it. So what you must learn is not to avoid sleep, but to precede sleep with decision. You fall asleep every night, but you do not always choose how you fall asleep. Tonight, you will choose. Now you may wonder, how will I know when I am truly in this state? There are signs. One sign is a feeling of distance from the body, as though you are no longer inside it so tightly. Another sign is a gentle wavering of attention. Thoughts feel slower and less gripping. Another sign is that effort disappears. You do not need to hold anything. You are being carried. Some feel warmth. Some feel coolness. Some feel a gentle drifting. All are signs that the senses are withdrawing. But the most reliable sign is this: desire loses its urgency. In the waking state, desire feels like reaching. In this AT's, desire feels like acceptance. If you still feel that you are trying to get something, you are not yet deep enough. Now understand this clearly. You do not take the desire into this state. You take the fulfillment into this state. This is the mistake nearly everyone makes. They go to bed wanting. They go to bed hoping. They go to bed negotiating with the world. And they awaken with the same conditions. The man who enters SATS correctly goes to bed as though the matter were already closed. There is nothing left to solve, nothing left to chase, nothing left to plead for. He does not say, let it happen. He feels, it has happened. And that feeling, carried across the threshold into sleep, becomes fate. You are not impressing the subconscious with desire. You are impressing it with decision. The subconscious does not fulfill wishes. It fulfills assumptions, and the strongest assumption is the one you fall asleep in. Now there is something subtle and beautiful here that you must grasp. The subconscious does not work with hours. It works with moments of conviction. You do not need to sustain the state for long. The moment the feeling of fulfillment is accepted without resistance, the impression is made. You will know this moment by a sudden quietness, a sense of it is done. The compulsion to continue imagining dissolves. Effort drops away. That is the sign the seed has entered. If you continue after that point, it is no longer planting. It is digging. And digging up seeds prevents growth. Once you feel the doneness, you must let go. Let sleep take you. Now let me speak about the body once more. For the body is both servant and witness in this work. When the assumption has truly been accepted, the body responds. You may feel a spontaneous exhale, a softening, a subtle warmth in the chest, a lightness in the limbs. These are not imagination. These are the nervous system responding to a new command. The body always obeys belief. And because the body obeys the mind, and the world obeys the body, the chain of causation is complete. Mind impresses body. Body moves through world. World reflects mind. This is the circuit of creation, and all of it pivots on this small drowsy gate. You do not create in the noise of the day. You select in the stillness of the night. This is why I have always told my students, your nights determine your days. Most people wake and react. The wise lie down and decide. And now I tell you something that few realize. You are always entering SATS each night, whether you use it or not. You are always planting, whether deliberately or accidentally. The only question is, are you planting weeds or wheat? If you go to bed rehearsing worry, the subconscious multiplies worry. If you go to bed reliving failure, the subconscious perpetuates failure. If you go to bed feeling powerless, the subconscious confirms powerlessness. But if you go to bed as one who has received, the world must bend. Now I will tell you also what not to do. Do not struggle to hold the scene. Do not panic if images fade. Do not correct the drifting mind harshly. Do not demand instant results. Do not check the outer world immediately upon waking, as though you are testing God. These acts pull you back into separation. Creation does not respond to inspection. It responds to assumption. You are not here to monitor results. You are here to select identity. And identity, once selected, does not require supervision. Now take this into yourself deeply. The state, akin to sleep, is not a trance. It is not hypnosis. It is not a supernatural condition. It is simply the natural point where creation is easiest because resistance is lowest. This is the same state children naturally live in. This is why children manifest swiftly. They assume without negotiation. They sleep without argument. Adults lost this ease not because it was taken from them, but because they buried it under years of explanation. Tonight you lay explanation aside. Tonight you do not analyze reality. Tonight you choose it. And when you choose it in this state, the choice becomes law. Now I ask you to feel this in your heart. There is nothing mystical about using satis. It is the most natural act in the world. You have done it unknowingly every night of your life. Now for the first time, you will do it as the conscious cause of your world. And when you do, not once, but with reverent regularity, you will begin to notice something quietly astonishing. Life will no longer feel hostile. Challenges will begin to soften before they mature. Help will arrive without summons. Opportunities will appear without search. And you will realize that the world has always been responding. You simply had not known how to speak to it. But the speech of the world is not vocal. It is feeling impressed at the gate of sleep. This is the art, this is the door. And now that you know where the gate stands, in the next movement, I will show you the single assumption that when carried through this gate, rearranges money faster than any labor, strategy, or plan. There is a great misunderstanding about time in the work of creation. Men believe that because a thing is important, it must therefore require long hours, great effort, and endless repetition. They transfer the logic of the marketplace into the kingdom of consciousness. And yet, all creation happens in an instant. A seed does not decide to become a tree gradually. The decision is instantaneous. The growth appears gradual, but the assumption is immediate. So I tell you without hesitation that 30 seconds are enough. Not because 30 seconds is a magical number, but because the subconscious does not measure time the way the conscious mind does. It measures intensity of impression. 1 second of white-hot conviction outweighs a lifetime of dull repetition. The subconscious is like a photographic plate. You may leave the lens open for an hour and capture nothing if the light is weak. But a single flash, if it is bright enough, will imprint the image forever. So too, with your inner assumption. Fire is stronger than length. Clarity is stronger than repetition. Feeling is stronger than ritual. Most people fail not because they practice too little, but because they practice too weakly. They dabble at the edge of conviction. They imagine half-heartedly. They feel vaguely. They never enter the state they desire. They look at it from a distance. This 30-second practice is not about doing more. It is about doing it once, but completely. The mistake of the world is noise. The law answers to stillness. If you take anything shallow into the subconscious, you will receive a shallow result. If you take something deep, even briefly, the result will be deep. Now here is the paradox. The shorter the time, the more pure the act must be. You cannot afford to wander for those few seconds. You cannot afford to check your doubts. You cannot afford to negotiate. For those seconds, you must be what you want to be, as though nothing else exists. This is why preparation matters more than duration. Before those 30 seconds, the mind must be cleared of argument. The heart must be willing. The will must be calm. You do not rush into the moment as one runs into a battlefield. You enter it as one enters a sanctuary. You must know beforehand what you are about to assume. Not the method, the identity. The average man lies down still thinking about the day, about arguments, about fear, about shortage. And when he drifts into sleep, these become the seeds of tomorrow. He is not using the law. He is being used by it. But the one who prepares does something entirely different. He decides before sleep who he is now. He does not ask the world. He announces it inwardly, and the world, having no will of its own, obeys. Now let us speak about intensity, for this is what separates the successful from the endlessly trying. Intensity is not strain. Strain is fear disguised as effort. Intensity is single-pointed acceptance. It is the absence of inner contradiction. It is the unity of thought and feeling. When you say inwardly that you have received and your body agrees, that is intensity. When you say you have received but your stomach tightens, that is division. The subconscious accepts only unity. This is why many speak affirmations and see nothing. Their words say yes, their nervous system says no, and the subconscious always obeys the stronger signal. Now I ask you to imagine something simple. You reach into your pocket and find a coin you thought you had lost. The amount is small. The event is ordinary. Notice the feeling. There is no trembling. There is no shock. There is no disbelief. There is simply a quiet recognition. There it is. That peaceful certainty is intensity without struggle. This is what you must carry into those 30 seconds, not fireworks, not drama, not pleading, but the calm authority of possession. The subconscious does not respond to begging. It responds to ownership. Now listen carefully, because here come the preparations that guard the purity of the act. Before you enter the practice, you must do one thing above all others. Stop arguing with reality. Do not rehearse your problems. Do not remind yourself of obstacles. Do not explain to yourself why it is difficult. All of that belongs to the old man. All of that is the language of yesterday. You do not take old seed into new soil. You must approach the moment with emotional neutrality. Not despair, not excitement, but stillness. From stillness, assumption becomes effortless. Now I will speak plainly about some of the common errors that poison this technique. The first error is trying to visualize movement. People imagine money coming, checks arriving, people calling, doors opening. They remain in the state of waiting. Waiting is not having, and the subconscious only multiplies having. The second error is checking the result emotionally. They finish the practice and immediately ask inwardly, did it work? This question itself is the confession that it has not been accepted as done. One does not ask whether a meal was eaten after swallowing. The third error is mixing fear with faith. They practice beautifully at night and then destroy the seed all day with inner conversations of doubt. They spend gold at midnight and print counterfeit during the day. The fourth error is seeking signs. The one who seeks signs does not yet trust law. He wants reassurance instead of results. And reassurance always delays results. The fifth error is attachment to method instead of state. They worship the process rather than becoming the person. The method is a bridge, not the destination. The law does not reward technique. It rewards identity. Now I will tell you something that many resist at first. You do not do this technique to get money. You do this technique to be the wealthy one. Money is the shadow. You are the substance. Those who chase the shadow never catch it. Those who become the substance cast it effortlessly. Now let me show you why 30 seconds are more than enough from another angle. Have you ever been startled by a sudden sound? A door slams, a horn blasts. In a fraction of a second, your entire body changes. Heart racing, muscles tensing, breath altering. That single instant affects the whole organism. The body needs no time to respond. When belief enters suddenly, so too with assumption. A sudden shift of self-concept sends shock waves through the nervous system, the subconscious, and the outer world. One true moment of being is more powerful than years of becoming. Now listen to this carefully, because it will free you from unnecessary effort. You do not build the assumption gradually during those 30 seconds. You enter it suddenly. The moment you step into the feeling of I already have, the work is done. The rest of the 30 seconds is simply allowing that state to settle, like still water after a stone is dropped. There is no command. There is no effort. There is no inner shouting. There is only acceptance. Now consider this. The world is not moved by your practice. The world is moved by your normal. Whatever feels normal to you is what life must reproduce. So the purpose of this 30-second act is not merely to plant a seed, it is to begin the normalization of a new identity. Each night, as you return to this state, the strange becomes familiar, the unfamiliar becomes natural, the impossible becomes expected, and what is expected must occur. You do not receive because you deserve, you receive because you assume. Now I want you to understand something subtle and liberating. You do not need to know how your assumption will become fact. The obsession with how is the enemy of faith. The moment you ask how, you step back into the role of planner instead of the role of chooser. The chooser declares. The planner delays. The subconscious does not need instruction. It needs only a destination. And the destination is always a feeling state. If you say inwardly, I now live in ease, the subconscious begins rearranging circumstances, people, timing, opportunities, impulses, everything, to match ease. You will never see the chain. You will only see the arrival. Now let me ask you a question, not for answer, but for recognition. Have you ever worried all night and found the next day shaped by that worry? Have you ever been confident about something and found events flow easily afterward? If so, then you have already used this law unconsciously. All that remains now is to use it deliberately. Now, before I take you into the living application of these 30 seconds later, I want you to hold one sentence in your heart. You do not impress the subconscious with force. You impress it with surrender. Force is strain. Surrender is certainty. The man who tries to convince the subconscious fails. The man who rests in knowing never needs to convince. You are not here to hypnotize yourself. You are here to accept your own decision as law. Now I will say something that may startle you. The law is not moved by your sincerity. It is moved by your assumption. A man may be sincere in fear and create disaster. A man may be casual in assumption and create fortune. Do not confuse sincerity with correctness. Now, as we prepare to go deeper, I must also warn you lovingly. If you treat this as entertainment, it will remain theory. If you treat this as law, it will become destiny. The world is full of people who know the teaching and live unchanged. They admire truth, but never enter it. They collect ideas as ornaments while wearing the same identity. But you are not here to admire. You are here to become. Now take this into your soul. 30 seconds of rightful assumption is not a trick. It is the moment you step into your creative authority. And authority does not beg, does not ask, does not hope. It decides. And when it decides from the state akin to sleep, the decree goes forth with no opposition. In the next movement, I will show you how to take this inner authority and release it into the outer world without resistance. How to let the law reverse cause and effect until relief itself becomes the signal of fulfillment. For a long while now you have been prepared. Slowly, deliberately, layer by layer, the old ideas have been loosened. You have learned that the world is not the cause, but the effect. You have learned that the feeling is the secret. You have learned that the state akin to sleep is the open door. And now, at last, we arrive at the living heart of this entire teaching. What I am about to give you is not a request to life. It is not a hope whispered into the dark. It is not a mechanical phrase to be parroted without meaning. It is an identity assumed. And identity, once assumed in consciousness, can no more fail to express than a seed can refuse to grow when placed in fertile ground. Most people believe they pray when they ask. They do not. They only declare lack. To ask is to confess that you do not have. The subconscious hears only the confession, never the intention. And so it brings more experiences that match the confession. Others attempt affirmations. They repeat words again and again without entering the state. Those words imply. They say, I am rich, while feeling poor. And the subconscious, hearing the feeling rather than the words, obeys the feeling. What I give you now is neither prayer nor affirmation. It is the quiet assumption of being. It is the inner surrender into the state of having already received. The assumption is simple. Its power is not in its length, but in its truth when felt. It is not spoken to the world. It is spoken only within the sanctuary of your own consciousness, at the edge of sleep, when the soul is unguarded and receptive. The assumption is this: you let yourself fall asleep as one who is already financially secure, not becoming secure, not hoping to be secure, but already secure. This may sound too gentle to be powerful, and yet gentleness is the clothing of all true power. The storm breaks things. The river carves mountains silently. You do not say to yourself, I will be wealthy. You do not say, money is coming. You do not say, this will work. All of these still place you in the posture of waiting. Instead, you take into sleep the inner posture of one whose money matter is finished, closed, completed, settled. How does that feel exactly? It does not feel dramatic. It does not feel electric. It does not feel intoxicating. It feels ordinary. It feels like the quiet after a long burden has been lifted. It feels like the naturalness of breathing without a tightening in the chest. It feels like the absence of urgency. It feels like not needing to think about money at all. This is the feeling you must be brave enough to accept without external permission. And now I will tell you the most subtle truth of all. The correct form of this assumption is not something you force into words. It is something you sink into. If you must use words to help you enter it, let them be soft and few. Let them not be declarations shouted into the mind, but acknowledgments whispered to the soul. For example, the correct way is not I am rich, I am wealthy, I have tons of money. These tempt the mind into comparison. They invite argument. They awaken the watchman of reason. The correct way is more like it is settled, it is done, all is well, I am at ease now. These statements do not provoke resistance because they do not point to an outer object. They point only to an inner condition. The subconscious cares nothing for numbers. It responds only to states. Now understand this very deeply. You are not telling the subconscious what you want. You are showing it who you are, and who you are, it will express without hesitation. The incorrect way, and the way most fail, is this. They lie down still thinking of bills. They rehearse obstacles. They argue silently with life. They negotiate with God. They beg. They plead. They try to believe. All of this is confession of lack. And then, in an act of confusion, they add a few hopeful words afterward, and wonder why nothing changes. You cannot plant wheat in soil that is already being hoed for weeds. The assumption must be the last thing you carry across the threshold of consciousness. Not fear, not hope, but fulfillment. And after you have touched it, even for one true moment, you must enter silence. Silence is the womb. The moment you feel that inward settling, that quiet acceptance, you must stop all inner speaking. You do not repeat. You do not decorate, you do not reinforce, you allow sleep to take you as one enters rest, after work completed. For sleep is not collapse, sleep is consent. And what you consent to inwardly, you consent to outwardly. Now let me speak to you plainly of the wrong tone, so you may recognize it instantly and avoid it. The wrong tone is strained, the wrong tone is desperate, the wrong tone is high-pitched. The wrong tone feels like gripping. The wrong tone feels like reaching. Any feeling of trying to make it work is the confession that it has not been accepted. The correct tone is low, deep, slow, unhurried. It is like the tone of a man who has laid down his tools at the end of the day because the task is finished. And now I will say something that may surprise you, even after all this preparation. If you attempt to use this assumption to get money, it will work only partially. If you use it to be the one who has money, it will work completely. Outcome consciousness is fragile. Identity consciousness is invincible. Now feel this truth. You are not here to move money. You are here to move self. And when the self moves, money follows as faithfully as the shadow follows the body. Now let us talk of the silence after the assumption. This silence is not emptiness. It is authority at rest. After the seed is planted, the farmer does not shout at the soil. He does not instruct the roots. He does not tug at the leaves. He sleeps, and the sleeping farmer harvests. So too with this work. The moment you have genuinely accepted the state, any further attempt to control the process becomes interference. You fall asleep as one who has already chosen. Now listen closely. The creative act does not happen when you say the assumption. It happens when you stop needing to say it. The moment it feels unnecessary to repeat, that is the moment of acceptance. Now let me tell you what will likely happen in the days following, so that you do not misjudge the process. At first, nothing outward may appear to change. This is the dangerous period where many abandon the state. They assume that because the world has not instantly rearranged itself, the inner act failed. But I tell you this, the seed always grows in darkness first. You will notice something else first, not in money, but in you. You will notice that you react differently to situations that once disturbed you. You will notice that fear rises less swiftly and leaves more quickly. You will notice a subtle confidence where once there was hesitation. These are the first fruits. Then, almost casually, without thunder or announcement, the outer world begins to follow. Someone speaks to you differently. An opportunity appears without struggle. A door opens where none appeared to exist. A channel forms that you could not have planned, and you will be tempted to trace the cause to the outer event. You will say, "This is why it happened," but you will be mistaken. The cause was the night you fell asleep, as one who had already received. Now I will say this with all the force of truth I possess. The world is not moved by your effort. The world is moved by your rest. When you rest in the assumption, you compel reality to labor on your behalf. Now you might ask, how long must I do this? And I answer, until it becomes natural. You are not trying to get a result. You are establishing a new normal. The moment financial security feels like your ordinary state, rather than a goal, the outer world has no choice but to reflect it. Now take this deeply into your heart. It is not repetition that creates. It is habituation to a new identity. Each night you take it on, briefly but truly. Each night you sleep in it, and slowly the foreign becomes familiar. The familiar becomes normal. The normal becomes inevitable. Now I will give you a final refinement of this assumption. Do not imagine yourself becoming wealthy. Do not imagine scenes of receiving. Simply imagine yourself tomorrow moving through the day with ease, unaware that anything is wrong, doing ordinary things, without the weight of money on your mind. You brush your teeth without tension. You walk without calculation. You speak without undercurrent of fear. That simple ordinariness is the most powerful wealth image of all. Because the subconscious always creates the conditions that justify your inner posture. If you posture as one who is relaxed, it must give you circumstances that allow relaxation. And now I leave you with this sacred instruction. Tonight, do not chase your desire into sleep. Let your desire meet you there as a memory already lived. And when you feel that inner settling, stop, enter silence, enter rest, enter sleep. You have done all that is required. The world will now do what it always does in response to belief. It will become, in the next movement, I will show you how this very same principle reverses cause and effect itself, so that relief becomes the signal that creation is already taking place. There is a moment in every man's journey when theory must bow before proof. Words, no matter how inspired, remain only words until they are sealed by experience. And so, now I will place before you not arguments, not philosophy, not speculation, but living testimony. These are not tales told to impress. These are confirmations of a law that operates with perfect indifference to age, status, education, or circumstance. Years ago, a man came to me who wore the appearance of success. He was neatly dressed, well-spoken, and outwardly secure. Yet beneath that surface, he was confined by an invisible ceiling. He worked in finance, surrounded by wealth that never quite became his own. His income had reached its limit. His superiors told him plainly that no greater advancement was possible. The ladder had ended. The walls had closed in, and he, with a family to support and children to educate, lay awake at night, calculating a future that frightened him. When he first heard my words, he resisted them inwardly. He had been trained to believe that position comes from networking, strategy, and permission. Yet something in his exhaustion made him willing to test what I taught. I asked him not to imagine success in stages, not to think of interviews or negotiations or introductions. I asked him to imagine only the end. The end was not the promotion. The end was the feeling of having already secured the kind of position he desired. I told him to lie at night on the very edge of sleep, and to feel the quiet satisfaction of the matter settled. He protested that he had no connections in that realm, no power, no visibility. And I answered him simply, The path is none of your business. Consciousness selects the end. The subconscious designs the bridge. Night after night, he entered the drowsy state and felt himself resting as a man whose professional destiny had already shifted. He did not try to imagine meetings. He did not attempt to map the route. He rested only in the afterward, the calm, the security, the inward sense of arrival. Weeks passed. Nothing outward appeared to change, and yet inwardly, something softened in him. The anxiety loosened its grip. The urgency faded. One afternoon, without warning, a man he did not know approached him and opened a conversation that led, by a series of invisible linkages, to an offer from a large foundation. He did not apply. He was sought. The position exceeded anything he had imagined. The salary transformed his life. There was no logical trail he could follow backward. There was only the inner shift that preceded it. Now consider another story, one far humbler in its setting, but equal in demonstration. A mother traveled across the country to visit her daughter. She expected a warm reunion. Instead, she found distress. The daughter needed a sum of money urgently, not gradually, not eventually, immediately. The mother did not have that sum available in a fluid form, and she feared that offering it as a loan would wound her daughter's dignity. Yet this mother had attended my lectures. She had learned the art of imagining from the end, and in the quiet of the night, she and her daughter did not ask where the money would come from. They did not visualize checks or benefactors. They imagined only one thing, the feeling of relief as though the problem were solved. They saw abundance flowing in from every direction without naming the channels. They rested in gratitude before there was any evidence. Days later, when the mother returned home, her own aged mother summoned her urgently. Without explanation, the old woman placed into her hands a check for the exact amount required, made out not for the mother, but for the granddaughter. No one had told the elderly woman of the problem. She had acted on an impulse she herself described as sudden and natural. Do you see what occurred? The subconscious of one family member moved the conscious actions of another without passing through planning, communication, or intention. The bridge formed invisibly. The assumption created the channel. Then there was the woman of 55 years, who came to me with no profession, no savings, and no safety net. Her life had narrowed. Her confidence had eroded. She had learned the teaching, yet when crisis arrived, she found she could not visualize beyond the weight of her circumstances. Each attempt to imagine abundance collapsed under fear, and so I gave her no image at all. I gave her only a feeling. I told her to drift nightly into the state of sleep, with a single inward realization. Isn't it wonderful? Not about anything specific, not about money, not about opportunity, only the raw feeling that something marvelous had already taken place. Night after night, she did this, softly, gently, without demand. Weeks passed, and then one day, an acquaintance she had not seen in years recognized her on the street. Through that casual meeting, a connection was sparked that led to a gift of thousands. And the gift did not stop with that first check. It matured into ongoing provision that sustained her for years. No interviews, no negotiations, no campaigns of effort, only a changed state. And then there was the child. I recall him vividly. He sat quietly as I spoke to the adults, a small boy with a toy in his hands, listening more closely than anyone suspected. I had told the grandmother that assumption creates fact. When I finished, the child announced with certainty that he now knew how to get what he wanted. What he wanted was a puppy. The grandmother dismissed the idea at once. The boy's father despised dogs. The household had long forbidden the idea. But the child did not debate. He did not question probability. He did what children still naturally know how to do. He assumed each night he imagined himself walking with his dog. He felt the leash. He felt the joy. He did not check for obstacles. He did not analyze resistance, and within weeks, the father returned home, carrying a puppy. Unable to explain his own change of heart, the boy was not surprised. Others were. This is the law operating without distortion. Money arrives in the same way, not through strain, not through persuasion, but through assumption quietly lived. I have received letters beyond count, describing similar unfoldings. A woman imagining luggage and boarding passes, felt her way into a journey she could not afford, and received tickets through a chain of events no planner could design. A man living in debt imagined the feeling of writing checks without fear, and found debts dissolving through opportunities he could never have anticipated. Time after time, the same pattern appears. Assumption precedes arrival. What astonishes most is not that money comes, it is how it comes. Because the way is always foreign to logic, it arrives as coincidence, as surprise, as invitation, as gift, as sudden redirection. And if one is still addicted to control, this will be unsettling. The law refuses to appear mechanical. It is alive. It uses minds, decisions, timing, and movement as instruments. Yet none of these instruments know the score they are playing. Your part is never the mechanism. Your part is always the state. Testimony after testimony reveals the same simple law. Those who fall asleep as those who have received awaken in worlds that respond. And now, having shown you these witnesses, I say to you plainly, you are not exempt. You are not different. The law does not single out favorites. It mirrors precisely and without partiality. The only distinction between those who tell such stories and those who long for them is not worthiness, not intelligence, not morality, but assumption. If you will assume as they assumed, you will receive as they received. And now, in the final movement, I shall show you how to embody what you have heard so completely that money becomes not a pursuit, but a consequence of who you have decided to be. There comes a moment in every sincere application of this law when the world appears to contradict your assumption. This is the place where many turn back, not because the law has failed them, but because they misinterpret the signs. They look at the surface and judge too quickly. They see turbulence and assume defeat. They see delay and assume denial. They see worsening conditions and assume error. And yet, this very moment is often the surest evidence that the old world is in the process of dying. You must understand something deeply. A state cannot pass away without resistance. The old assumptions that shaped your former life do not vanish politely. They struggle for survival. They make one final appearance, sometimes more dramatic than before, as if to say, I am still here. And if you mistake that last echo for truth, you resurrect the very thing you are trying to leave behind. It is written that when the unclean spirit goes out of a man, it wanders and then attempts to return. That is not theology. That is psychology. That is the behavior of an old state losing its hold. Poverty consciousness, fear consciousness, anxiety consciousness. They do not depart without protest. So do not be surprised if, after a night of true assumption, you wake to a day that looks unchanged or even more uncomfortable. You are not seeing the future. You are seeing the remainder of the past. What you see today was planted long ago. What you plant tonight will be seen tomorrow. The farmer does not curse the soil when weeds appear after new seed is planted. He knows they are the last growth of old planting. He does not tear up the field in panic. He allows the new seed to take root deeper, while the old exhausts itself on the surface. You must do the same. There is one great danger at this stage, and that is emotional reaction. The moment you react with fear, anger, despair, or discouragement, you feed life back into the old state. Emotion is nourishment. What you feel deeply, you support. Do not treat appearances as verdicts. Treat them as shadows. A shadow has no power of its own. It moves only when the thing casting it moves. And the thing casting your shadow world is consciousness. I have seen men plant the right seed at night and spend the entire next day watering the wrong crop with worry. They undo in daylight what they accomplished in darkness. The instruction is simple, but the discipline is subtle. Do not dig up the seed. To dig up the seed is to check constantly, to inspect conditions emotionally, to ask inwardly, is it working? To scan the world for proof, to replay disappointment, to measure time. All of that is digging. And no seed can grow when it is continually being unearthed. You must learn the art of righteous judgment. This is not moral judgment. This is perceptual judgment. It is the discipline of judging from the end not from the middle of the process. It is the ability to look at symptoms and refuse to call them causes. Righteous judgment says, this is not the final word. Righteous judgment says, this is a passing phase. Righteous judgment says, this too will conform. The unrighteous judgment is the impulsive one. The one that says, nothing is changing. The one that says, it is getting worse. The one that says, I have failed. These judgments are not observations. They are assumptions restated. When you judge from the appearance, you bind yourself again to the thing you are outgrowing. Now let me speak to you about delay. For delay is one of the greatest tests of identity. Delay does not mean denial. Delay means rearrangement is underway. There are minds to be influenced, decisions to be nudged, conditions to be repositioned, timing to be synchronized. None of this appears to the senses, but all of it is movement. The conscious mind sees only the stillness of the surface and panics. The subconscious sees the currents beneath and continues without hesitation. If you interfere, you interrupt the choreography. The one who understands the law does not become impatient, he becomes quiet. He moves through delay with a strange peace that confuses those who still depend on appearances. Now let me warn you of one of the more subtle traps: interpreting neutrality as failure. Sometimes things do not worsen. They simply appear to stagnate, and in that stagnation, doubt creeps in. The mind whispers, nothing is happening. And if you accept that whisper with feeling, you begin to plant a new seed of nothingness. You must learn to honor silent movement. The root grows in darkness. The child forms in secret. The seed cracks underground. The absence of visible motion does not mean the absence of creative activity. It often means the opposite. Now, about the feeling that it's getting worse. This experience, though frightening, is extremely common. It happens when the old state is being dislodged and the world momentarily destabilizes. Like furniture being shifted in a dark room, you bump into things not because the room is broken, but because the arrangement is changing. You must not curse the darkness during rearrangement. When this happens, your work is not to fight the world. Your work is to remain faithful to the inner feeling, to return night after night, to sleep in the same identity that initiated the change, not with strain, not with pressure, but with the calm stubbornness of one who knows. Persistence is not repetition driven by panic. Persistence is rest maintained without compromise. The world respects calm persistence. The world mocks anxious insistence. The farmer who digs his field every morning looking for the sprout never harvests. The farmer who waters and waits always does. Now let me say something that may surprise you. You do not persist to make it happen. You persist because you already decided that it has happened. Persistence is not effort toward a future. Persistence is loyalty to a present identity. The moment you begin to persist in order to get results, you have shifted back into lack. You persist because you are not negotiating with actuality. You have already accepted it. This is where the deepest faith is born, not the emotional faith of elation, but the sober faith of quiet certainty. There will be days when you feel strong. There will be days when you feel uncertain. There will be moments when fear tries to speak again. Do not wage war with these emotions. Allow them to pass through without coronation. Emotions only become kings when you enthrone them as truth. You can feel uncertainty without believing it. You can feel fear without obeying it. Your obedience belongs only to the inner assumption you chose in silence. At night, return to it, not as an attempt, not as a repair, but as the natural end of day returning to self. And every return deepens the groove. Every return weakens the old trace. Eventually, one morning you will wake and realize that the doubts have lost their authority. They may flicker, but they no longer rule. You will find yourself reacting differently without effort. Calm will have become natural. And when calm becomes natural, the world adjusts. I want you to understand this with absolute clarity. The law is never suspended. It is only misunderstood. When things appear to worsen, it is not because the law is failing. It is because the law is completing its cycle with the old assumption before fully expressing the new. Do not confuse transition with contradiction. You are not going backward. You are moving through. And now I leave you with this final truth for this passage. You do not walk by sight. You walk by state. Sight shows you where you have been. State determines where you are going. If you will remain loyal to the state you chose before sleep, not with tension, not with desperation, but with quiet dignity, then the outer world must and will reorganize itself around you. In the final movement, I will show you how this inward identity becomes so natural that you no longer need to do anything at all, and the world begins to reflect wealth as effortlessly as a mirror reflects form. When the assumption has been lived in secret long enough, something subtle happens within you. You stop doing the technique, and you start being the result. This is the true sign that the state has become natural. You no longer remind yourself to feel wealthy. You no longer rehearse it as an exercise. It simply becomes the way you move through the world. And from that moment, manifestation no longer feels like an effort. It feels like identity expressing itself. The one who is truly in the state of wealth does not walk with haste. There is no nervous urgency in his step. There is no hurried proving in his motion. He moves with a quiet assurance that time itself is on his side. When you see this shift happen in yourself, you will recognize it not by excitement, but by ease. Your body will begin to behave as though it is no longer chased by necessity. Listen carefully. Desperation always walks fast. Fulfillment walks steadily. Need hurries. Possession relaxes. And so the wealthy state begins first in the body. Shoulders loosen, breath deepens. The jaw unclenches. Even when the world has not yet rearranged itself fully, the body is already living in the after effect. This is not imitation. This is inner recognition. Speech changes as well, not because you train it to change, but because it can no longer pretend. The one who is living in wealth does not speak in disclaimers. He does not constantly explain what he cannot do. He does not repeatedly justify his limitations. The language of defense falls away. There is no longer the need to announce struggles to be understood. The wealthy state does not boast. It does not announce. It does not prove. It simply speaks from calm authority. There is no excess in its tone. There is no apology for existing. And when this begins to emerge in you, you will notice that your words start to arrive with less emotional charge, less drama, less reaction. You will say, "It will be taken care of," and you will hear truth in your own voice. Decisions also begin to simplify. The old state was filled with hesitation. It measured every choice through the lens of fear. What if I lose? What if I fail? What if I can't recover? And because it asked these questions, it often froze. But the wealthy identity does not calculate from fear. It calculates from continuity. It assumes recovery as natural. It assumes opportunity as normal. It assumes support as present, even when unseen. Therefore, it decides without torment. It moves without pleading. This does not mean reckless behavior. It means non-defensive behavior. It means action without inner panic. The one who has assumed wealth does not need to justify every desire. He does not ask permission to rest. He does not feel guilt for receiving. Guilt is the shadow of unworthiness, and unworthiness dissolves when the state changes. There comes a moment, and I have seen this moment in countless students, when they suddenly realize they are no longer trying to convince themselves. They are no longer checking to see if the feeling is still there. They simply notice quietly that the old argument has vanished. They still may not have seen the full external harvest, but the inner debate has ended. And when the debate ends, the world follows. There are certain inward signs by which you may know that the wealthy state has taken root, even before the outer evidence arrives. One of these signs is the disappearance of envy. When you no longer feel threatened by the success of others, you are no longer identifying with lack. Envy belongs only to the one who believes there is not enough. When that belief dissolves, admiration replaces jealousy. Another sign is the softening of urgency. You may still desire. Desire does not disappear, but it no longer feels life or death. Urgency is born of fear. When fear withdraws, desire becomes calm and spacious. Another sign is that you stop rehearsing explanations for why you do not yet have what you want. The inner courtroom closes. You are no longer prosecuting reality, and perhaps the clearest sign of all is this: you stop waiting. Waiting is one of the most subtle symptoms of lack. Waiting keeps the desire in the future. Living in the state brings it into the present. When you find that you are no longer counting days, no longer scanning for signs, no longer measuring progress, You have stepped out of waiting and into being. This does not mean passivity. It means trust has become embodied. And from this place, your actions change without strategy. You may feel moved to speak to someone without knowing why. You may feel moved to rest instead of struggle. You may feel moved to decline an opportunity that once would have frightened you to release. None of this will feel dramatic. It will feel obvious. The wealthy state does not chase opportunity. It recognizes it when it passes and responds without hunger. You will also notice that your relationship with time changes. The old state always hurried. The new state allows. The old state feared delay. The new state trusts sequence. When the clock ceases to control your emotions, money soon ceases to control your identity. And now I will tell you the most important transformation of all. When the wealthy identity becomes natural, you stop trying to become someone. You simply remain who you are. The striving self dissolves. The seeking self grows quiet. The negotiator rests. There is no longer bargaining with destiny. There is only participation. This is what I meant when I said long ago that man does not manifest what he wants. He manifests what he is. You can practice techniques for years and remain unchanged if you never allow the identity to shift. But you can change identity in a night and watch techniques become unnecessary. The technique was never the power. It was only the doorway. Identity is the house, and once you live in the house, you do not keep standing at the door to knock. When you stop justifying yourself inwardly, the world stops demanding justification outwardly. When you stop apologizing silently for existing, the world stops placing you in positions where apology seems necessary. Your assumptions about yourself are always being overheard by life. If you assume that you must fight for everything, life gives you battles. If you assume that you are supported, life gives you support. If you assume that you are chosen, life finds a way to agree. This is not reward. This is correspondence. Now, one of the final errors I wish to dissolve for you is the idea that the wealthy state changes only your finances. It changes your entire relationship with existence. Money is just one of its reflections. Peace is another. Stability is another. Confidence is another. And above all, self-trust is another. When you no longer doubt that life is working with you, you stop exhausting yourself against it. You will still act. You will still choose. You will still engage. But you will no longer wrestle with invisible enemies. And now I want you to understand this carefully. Nothing I have described requires your outer world to be perfected first. The identity does not wait for permission. It does not wait for numbers. It does not wait for applause. It waits for consent. You give that consent before sleep. But the consent must eventually become daylight behavior. Not forced behavior. Not rehearsed behavior. But natural behavior. And when it does, the outer confirmation will no longer surprise you. It will feel inevitable. You will not say, "How did this happen?" You will say, quietly, inside, "Of course." Because assumption, once natural, removes astonishment. And when astonishment disappears, creation becomes effortless. In the final passage, I will show you what remains after the law has given you what it promised, and why money, though powerful, is not the final revelation. There is one final work that must be done if the new state is to remain unopposed. It is quiet work, invisible work, and yet it is among the most powerful operations of consciousness that I know. It is the art of revision, the deliberate reshaping of memory, so that the past no longer leans forward into the future. Most men believe the past is fixed. They believe it is an immovable sequence of facts that can only be remembered, never altered. And because they believe this, they allow old failures, old humiliations, old disappointments, and old wounds to continue speaking into their present. They claim to have changed their assumptions, yet they return nightly to the same inner record of defeat. And the subconscious, faithful as it is, continues to express what is impressed upon it. I tell you without hesitation, the past lives only in consciousness. There is no past stored in stones, no memory etched into walls. Every past that troubles you exists now, only as a present feeling that you keep alive by attention. When attention is withdrawn, the past dissolves as surely as darkness dissolves when the light is lit. Revision is the deliberate placement of that light, Do you understand what I am saying? You are not bound by what happened. You are bound only by the version of what happened that you continue to accept as real. And so, if you wish the future to be free, the past must be released, not by forgetting, not by suppressing, but by revisioning. I have seen men transform their entire financial destiny by revising the emotional meaning of a single memory. A father once came to me who had carried one moment for decades, the moment his business failed, and he stood before his family with shame in his voice. That moment shaped every decision he made afterward. It became the silent ruler of his confidence. It whispered, "You are not safe." And so, no matter how much he worked, no matter how carefully he planned, he always stopped short of abundance. I taught him revision. I told him to return to that scene at night, not as it occurred, but as he wished it had occurred, to feel himself standing before his family, not in shame, but in quiet authority, to hear himself speak not words of failure, but words of strength, to feel pride instead of defeat, to replace the emotional conclusion of the scene with a new one. He resisted at first. The old pain felt more real than the imagined relief. That is always the case in the beginning. A bit disguises itself as truth, but he persisted. Night after night, he rewrote that memory until the old emotional sting could no longer be summoned. It faded like a dream one cannot quite recall. And when the memory lost its emotional charge, something remarkable happened in his present life. Opportunities he had always feared suddenly felt approachable. Decisions he had always avoided now appeared natural, and with those decisions came income that had never before passed through his hands. The past did not change. His relationship to it did, and that changed everything. Now hear this with precision. You do not revise to deceive yourself about history. You revise to change the state that history left within you. It is the state that creates, never the circumstance. The subconscious does not know yesterday from tomorrow. It does not know memory from imagination. It knows only impressions felt as real. Therefore, when you revise with feeling, you are not pretending. You are issuing a new instruction. Now let me guide you into the practice itself with simplicity and clarity. Each night, before you enter the deeper assumption for your future, take a few moments to examine your day. Ask yourself quietly, what moment today carried emotional weight for me? It may have been something said to you, a number you saw, a bill, a conversation, a disappointment, a moment of fear. Do not judge it, simply identify it. Then, in imagination, rewind the moment. See it again, but do not allow it to unfold in the same way. Change it, hear different words, see a different outcome, feel a different conclusion, and most importantly, feel the emotional release you would have felt if the interaction had aligned with your desired state. This is the first movement. The second movement is emotional substitution. You must let the old feeling be replaced. If the original moment carried fear, you replace it with peace. If it carried shame, you replace it with dignity. If it carried lack, you replace it with sufficiency. You cannot hold two opposite emotional conclusions about the same event. One must yield. The third movement is finality. You must feel that the revised version is finished, sealed, complete. No lingering negotiation, no return to the old version. This is not willpower. This is emotional decision. When done correctly, revision leaves the psyche quieter than before. The agitation dissolves. The mind settles. You feel lighter, and this lightness is not emotional. It is structural. Something in your inner architecture has shifted. Now understand this. Every unrevised memory is a blueprint that the subconscious assumes you wish to repeat. Not because you consciously desire it, but because you have kept it alive with feeling. The subconscious cannot distinguish regret from instruction if both carry emotion. That is why so many men relive the same financial patterns again and again while sincerely hoping for change. They plant prosperity at night and water poverty by day through memory. Revision cuts this cycle cleanly. It tells the subconscious this story is no longer valid. And when the subconscious no longer has a story to repeat, it creates a new one. There is an even deeper layer to this that few understand. You are not revising only events. You are revising identity. Every memory you carry says implicitly, this is the kind of person I am. This is what happens to people like me. Revision dissolves that identity at its root. It changes what you believe yourself to be. When you revise yourself as one who succeeds rather than fails, receives rather than loses, recovers rather than collapses, you are not changing a scene. You are changing the category of being to which you belong. And life always confirms category. Now let me address a question that arises in many minds. Is this not simply self-deception? If deception means seeing what is not present to the senses, then all imagination is deception. And yet imagination built every city, every institution, every invention that now stands upon the earth. The visible world is not the parent of the invisible. The invisible is the parent of the visible. What you call facts are the frozen imaginings of other men. Revision is not denial. It is creative authority. You deny the emotional meaning that no longer serves you, and you assert a new meaning that must now take its place. You are not lying to the past. You are redeeming it. And when the past is redeemed, the future is freed. I have watched men revise decades of misfortune, not by changing what happened, but by changing the feeling they carried as truth. Once that feeling dissolved, the world had no further instruction to recreate the old drama. Now I must tell you something that will deepen your application of this art. You cannot revise effectively from a position of self-contempt. If you attempt to revise with the secret belief that you deserved the old misfortune, the revision will not hold. Guilt reasserts the old contract. Revision requires compassion for the former self. You are not correcting a criminal. You are releasing a child who did not know. Every former version of you acted from the level of consciousness available at that time. You do not punish the seed for not being the tree. You water it. When you revise from compassion, not from force, the shift becomes permanent. Now let this be clear. Revision is not optional when building wealth of consciousness. It is necessary, for every unresolved moment of financial fear becomes a silent saboteur of present assumption. You may plant 100 new seeds, but if the soil contains old toxins, growth will distort. Revision purifies the soil, and when the soil is clean, assumption expresses itself without resistance. There will come a night, and it will surprise you, when you revise a memory that has followed you for years, and you suddenly feel nothing, no ache, no tightening, no defense, only neutral calm. And in that moment you will understand what freedom feels like in the nervous system. That is the moment when the past truly releases its grip. And once the past releases you, the present ceases to be reaction. It becomes creation. This is why I say, this work is not merely about money. It is about sovereignty of consciousness. Money follows sovereignty as a shadow follows form. In the final passage, I will show you what lies beyond the law itself, what remains when even the desire for wealth dissolves into something far greater and far more permanent. You have now heard the law. You have learned how assumption moves the invisible and compels the visible to obey. You have seen how feeling plants the seed, how the state akin to sleep opens the inner gate, how identity, not effort, determines the harvest. All of this belongs to the realm of the law, and the law is faithful. It never fails. It will give you what you assume, whether that assumption be wealth or want, freedom or bondage, peace or anxiety. The law is impartial. It dooms no one and saves no one. It only reflects. But there is something beyond the law. And this, my friend, is what I have waited until the very end to speak of. For the law will give you things. The promise will give you yourself. The law will rearrange circumstances. The promise will awaken the one who commands all circumstances. The law will clothe you in gold. The promise reveals the one who created gold and dust alike. You see, long before I ever taught the law publicly, I encountered something far more shattering, far more silent, far more eternal. I discovered that the power you have been using, this I am, this awareness of being, was never meant to merely produce effects in the world. It was intended to awaken to its own source. The law is the servant. The promise is the revelation. You may master the law and never know God. But when the promise awakens, you will know that you and God were never separate. Now I speak to you softly, not as a teacher of technique, but as one who has walked through the inner door and returned. There comes a moment, after many assumptions have borne fruit, after many desires have been fulfilled, after wealth has come and gone and returned again, when something strange occurs within the soul. The craving for outcomes begins to loosen. The hunger for proof diminishes, and in its place rises a quiet, unspeakable recognition. You begin to sense that the self who desired wealth was itself a garment, and beneath that garment stands the naked I am, not rich, not poor, not successful, not struggling, only being. This is what Scripture veiled in ancient language. This is why the promise was never about bread alone, nor silver, nor houses. It was always about the moment when the Son discovers He is the Father. And this discovery does not shout. It does not announce itself with signs. It does not arrive through emotional ecstasy. It arrives as a stillness that feels older than the stars. I tell you now with the utmost reverence, the same awareness that assumed money into being will one day awaken to itself as God. And in that awakening, even the desire for manifestation falls away like a discarded cloak. But until that hour comes, the law remains your faithful companion. You are not wrong to desire abundance. You are not mistaken to wish for ease, for beauty, for freedom. These desires are the early footprints of something far greater moving through you. They are the training wheels of divinity. You learn to walk as a creator by first shaping shadows. Money is only a shadow, and you have learned to move shadows. But now let me return you gently to where you began, because this night is still a night of assumption. Before sleep takes you, before the senses dissolve, before the world fades into silence, you will once more speak the assumption, not as a technique, not as a plea, not as an experiment, but as an identity, not loudly, not with strain, not with urgency, but with the calm finality of one who knows. You will let the body soften, you will let the breath slow, you will let the world withdraw, and in that sacred interval where thought becomes quiet and awareness stands naked, you will allow the assumption to arise, not as words first, but as being. You will not say it to make something happen. You will say it because it already is. You will not speak it to change the future. You will speak it because it describes the present. And when the words finally form within you, they will not carry effort. They will carry rest. I am. Not I will become. Not I am trying. Not I hope. I am. And into that vastness of being, you may let your chosen state enter like a perfume into still air. Wealth, if you choose. Peace, if you choose. Freedom, if you choose. But now they enter as ornaments upon being, not as conditions for being. You no longer need the world to prove you are complete. You use the world as a canvas, because you already are. This is the promise. And now, before this voice releases you back into silence, I give you the final blessing, not as a teacher to a student, but as awareness addressing itself through another form. May this night be counted unto you for righteousness. May your assumption fall into the deep soil of your being without resistance. May the old world loosen its grip without struggle. May the new state feel so natural that you forget it was ever different. May you awake to evidence without hunger. May you receive without astonishment. May you give without fear. May you rest without guilt. And when in time the law has finished clothing you in every symbol of abundance, may the promise awaken you from the dream of separation itself. Sleep now, not as a seeker, but as one who has already entered. And let it be done unto you, not according to effort, not according to merit, but according to your faith.